So the next speaker is from Australia, Jason Ross, and Jason created a very fast-growing digital platform to provide an access to the information about the wood industry. So, Jason, here's your word.
Thank you very much, Alex. And actually, I was just thinking about Isabella's presentation because just before I dive into WoodCentral, I thought I'd give a bit of an overview of the Australian market and where the opportunities are for some Linkiwood members. But it's interesting because many of our highest trafficked articles, and the way that WoodCentral works is that we are a data-driven company where we effectively respond to article impressions and response rates from our users. And AI is a massive topic that has significant interest, not only in the wood processing industry as well, but also in the forest as well. So you look at, for example, all the different technical innovations with regards to plantings and so forth like that. I think it's actually, in terms of reframing forestry as a modern, technologically advanced industry, I think it's a really important part of the puzzle. So before I start, as I said, my name is Jason Ross. If you haven't seen me on LinkedIn, my apologies for spamming everyone's chat with all the articles from WoodCentral, but I am the wood publisher of WoodCentral. We are the world's largest and only integrated media platform for forest-based news in the world. Since launching in February, we've now got over 165,000 users. Interestingly, 70% are under the age of 45, 47% are under the age of 35. And that's purely because of the technology that we use, the images that we use, the captions we use, the TikTok videos, the YouTube videos, the fact that we monitor and evaluate the type of topics that the youth are interested in, and we try to push content out around those key themes as well. Before I was
Jason, excuse me, could you please use your full screen? Try to.
Sure.
Thank you.
That's all right. That better?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Alex. So yeah, so before I set up WoodCentral, I was actually the marketing communication director for PFC Australia and New Zealand for 6 years, which was quite an interesting experience. I was from outside the forestry industry completely. My background's actually in commercial construction, real estate development, and politics. So to jump from an industry where the commercial construction industry, where it's very, very technologically advanced, you're dealing with significantly larger contract values, much greater technologies, jumping into the forestry sector where we're sort of more at the start of the innovation curve. It's been interesting to look at taking some of those learnings from the construction industry, how you communicate through that industry, and applying it back into the forest has been quite an interesting experience. And as I said, it's interesting because I was just thinking with the ITTO discussion, ITTO is very similar to PFC International when you think about the fact that we are effectively using a standard to demonstrate the social license of forest-based products through global supply chains. So there's a lot of integration, and I found with WoodCentral that the significant growth that we've experienced around the world, 75% of our traffic is actually outside the Asia-Pacific region, has really been amplified by ITTO members reading our content, sharing PFC International, FSC. And I've sort of been able to build, micronism, like sort of different markets from that particular advantage. And as I said before that, I was director and a CEO of a multinational commercial construction and real estate development company as well. So with a bit of a background in furniture as well, which was quite interesting. So before I go into my spiel about WoodCentral, I think it's really important to touch on the Australian market, because we mentioned before the fact that Australia is often at the end of the supply chains for forest products. Australia, many people don't realize, but Australia is actually the 6th most forested country in the world. So even though we often talk about the red centre, there's a significant amount of forest within on the Australian continent. And with the decisions by the Victorian government, so 2 successive state governments, to actually exit out of native forest management, 2 of the largest hardwood markets in Australia for supply have actually gone off market. So we've covered a lot of stories at WoodCentral, but we're getting a lot more timber coming into the Australian market from Brazil, more timber coming through the Chinese supply chains from Africa to meet that demand for smaller diameter logs, to meet the demand that we've now we've actually lost because we're exiting out of those industries. It's very likely that the Tasmanian industry, I just wrote a story about it today, but the Tasmanian industry, the Queensland industry and the New South Wales industry over the next 5 years will actually exit out of the native forest sector, which isn't good for workers in the native forest sector in Australia, because it's much more labour intensive than the plantation or the softwood sector. But there's so many opportunities for importing into the Australian marketplace. And we'll go through the mass timber options as well. But I think it's really fascinating. Interestingly, the carbon debate in Australia is really tied to the COP28 discussions happening right now about whether the fact that they're actually exiting out of the forest industry could be included as part of their carbon capture. So it'd be interesting to see with some of the members around the world, we've got a few in the chat now, what impact that actually might have on global markets as well. So this is a bit of a really bad slide, but it actually looks at the Australian government State of the Forest report. So they're about to release their next State of the Forest report in accordance with their FAO requirements. But the key points I want to raise is the fact that, as I said, 40% of the country's hardwood estate has now been removed from the market, and there's actually a push to remove the rest of it in the next 12 months. At the same time, the softwood plantation estate is actually at its lowest level in 20 years. So we don't have enough timber in this country. I know it's a problem. I write about it all the time in the North American market, the UK, all over the world. We have a timber shortage. Australia is no different. Unfortunately, we're at the end of the supply chains. So it's very difficult to get that timber into the country. And that's why I say that we have a wood famine at the moment. And it's sort of happening at a time when the Australian commercial construction industry is moving away from steel and concrete to meet their embodied carbon targets. So they're looking at mass timber solutions, but because we don't have the supply of mass timber coming into the country, we actually have to continue to look abroad. And that's why we continue to look through to the European markets. The Chinese trade that's been reinstated over the last 8 months has been very important for the exporters for Australia, but a lot of that timber is being exported from Australia to China, manufactured as plywood and coming back into the country, and the same with New Zealand as well. So we very much operate in a very globalized economy. Look, in terms of investing in the Australian market, and I know it's not really my discussion today, but it's tied to the fact how WoodCentral is structured. There are significant strong pricing signals. Australia is a really good market for buying into. We have very simplified supply and value chains. So there's only about 400 companies in the Australian supply chain for timber forest-based products. And the interesting thing is that 97% of those are certified under PFC or FSC certification. So the data already exists, and the supply chains already exist to sell into those markets very, very easily. And because there's a strong certification culture, if you actually have a PFC or an FSC certified product, it's very easy to actually enter the market. And we'll go through how we can do that as part of my WoodCentral spiel. So a bit about WoodCentral. This is a bit outdated now. I said 130,000 users. It's about 160 now. And we've had about 40,000 users that have returned to the site in the last 28 days. And that's very deliberate, the way that we set up our articles and the way that we use LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. It's all very deliberate. As I said, 70% of the users are under the age of 45, 47% under 35. Interestingly, the younger audience is driven by Google, Bing, and Yahoo indexing. So because we do 5 articles a day, those articles get indexed on Google, Yahoo, and you become the source of truth, and also through LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and Twitter. So that's part of what I call the organic social suite. Interestingly, we also have a daily digest, and I know I was scanning through and I noticed a few people are actually on our digest. That audience is much older, and I think this is the challenge that we have as an industry, understanding that the majority of our decision makers are in that demographic. We're used to, I'm not 55 or over, but I'm sort of used to it myself. I'm used to getting an email. I'm used to opening an email and scanning through an article and seeing what I like and clicking on it. I found with WoodCentral, that audience is over 55, and it's primarily male. So the challenge I have is that that's the audience that often advertise, but the way that we can build out our industry and build connections is actually by targeting the youth, as we spoke about before as well. So sort of getting that balance right between the two is really important. And as I said, we've got users in 190 countries, 30% in Australia and New Zealand, 65% in the ASEAN region. We've got good relationships with the likes of PFC, where we develop content for them and we distribute the information through. 15% in North America and 10% in EU. By far and away, our biggest market for traffic growth is unsurprisingly India, because India is becoming a massive market for manufactured products as a distribution point. They're looking aggressively, they're looking significantly to build out their supply chains. They love our content. Anytime I write an Indian article, I'm just chasing clicks, which is good. I mentioned before the power of video. I had a bit of an incident here. I had a bit of a black eye, which is probably why this video took off, talking about how the Taliban is fueling the China supply chain for certain products. But, you know, these videos can get, I get about 1,000 views a day from my different videos. And look, people often say, well, what is the point of video? I think video is important because it's about targeting the right audience with the video. The thing about our industry is that the AdWords are so cheap. So you can very easily target the architects, designers, the merchants, the supply chain, anyone you really want to target in the industry. You can target it through YouTube, TikTok, Google, Facebook. It's really easy to target. And some of these videos I actually had in my PowerPoint, but I just realized it's not going to work. I had these that I could show you some examples. But, you know, this Afghan video I did last week got 3,000 views in 12 hours. Here's one I talk outside the Gabba, which just got announced as the Olympic venue for 2032. And I've got also an article about Kashmir cricket bats and the global shortage of timber going through because of overlogging in Kashmir. So, you know, these videos is very much following the news cycle. So if we follow the news cycle, what I do is I actually go through and the beauty is what I do is that if someone clicks on my site, I can run the Facebook. If they're signed into Facebook, we can retarget those direct users based on the fact that they've signed through the sites. And this is what mainstream media are doing. This is what, as an industry, we're far behind on. There's so many ways to target directly who you want to target based on data and traffic flows. So that's really what I'm interested at WoodCentral, is building out a database and building out so I can understand exactly who looks on articles. You know, we've been going 8 months. We've got over 1,300 unique articles that are indexed. I can work out who is interested in those particular pieces, why they're interested in those pieces, and how I can partner with global companies to make sure that their messaging can go to those particular users as well. So, which I think is really important. So this sort of looks at, I did actually try, when I did the PowerPoint, it didn't look like this, but but this looks like, this is supposed to explain how WoodCentral works compared to mainstream media, Timber Newswire, government sources, and trade media. So I think that we have some amazing publications, and I use ITTO's newsletters for inspiration to write content, because it is the most technically advanced content that you can find if you want to find out about the industry. But what I do is I sort of take a mainstream media approach to it. I develop the content into a story that meets the narrative of the industry, of the news cycle. And because so many people scroll through Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, LinkedIn, especially LinkedIn, if you actually want to get onto a platform, LinkedIn is by far and away the most valuable platform, because you can actually go in and actually populate articles into individual groups. You just get hundreds of people clicking on the articles if you've got the right images, the right captions, the right photos, everything. It's just right for the taking. But, you know, as I said, so you've got more technical information, less technical information. So mainstream media, when they cover timber or paper-based topics, they're not very technical, but they've got great integration of their channels. So they've got great viral content. I'm trying to go for the other side of it, where we have rich information, but taking some of that learning from the mainstream media to broaden the audience out. And if we can broaden the audience out, we can get more young people involved in the industry. We can get more people wanting to buy timber products, protect the timber industry, invest in carbon markets. it's much better for everyone. So that's kind of where we go from there. So, you know, that's my email address. Very happy to write articles. As I said, we write 5 unique articles a day. So my strategy is that I try to write an article from Australia and New Zealand. I try to write an article from Europe, from Africa, and from North America or every day. So if you subscribe to WoodCentral, you get our newsletters, you'll see that today I've got a story from Tasmania in Australia. I've got a story from the UAE about buying carbons in Africa. And a story from the Ukraine about investing in the Ukraine forest industry. You know, it's very broad. So the idea is that you'll find something. And there's one about NASA, the fact that NASA's now developing forest inventory stock list that is providing COP28 decision makers with decision about carbon. So it's very broad. So I think Alex is giving the roundup. So if I have any questions, I'm happy to take any on the call now. I'll wait for the panel.
Yep. Thank you, Jason, for your question. I see here a question from Paul. So there is a question about
from Daniel.
Yeah, can you see this question?
Yes, I can. So Daniel, that's a really good question. Are there any discussions in Australia regarding the non-management of forests versus traditional forests, given the forest fires and other natural? Yes, there is. So one of the most famous scientists that's regularly cited around the world is David Lindemann, who many people on the call have probably heard of. He's just released research which, depending on who you talk to, they either agree with him or they disagree with him. The fact that he claims that forests that are subject to intense logging and harvesting are more prone to fire damage than others. So there is a significant discussion around that at the moment. And actually that fire discussion, there's another question on there as well, Alex, so I'm just having a look at that. That fire discussion at the moment is actually being used to demonstrate that the industry should be closed. So the big debate happening in Australia at the moment for native forests, and native is different to softwood. So plantation is different to native in Australia. Where in Europe, when I was at PFC, I know that monoculture, it's a very different debate than in Australia around native versus plantation. But one of the arguments, and you know, with my readership, I actually have a significant amount of ENGOs that engage with my content because I'm quite neutral about this. One of the debates from the ENGOs, or the environmental non-government groups, is around fire and protecting coops and protecting biodiversity and wildlife. It's a major issue that we face there. In terms of, does the young generation think that nature can do a better job than the professional foresters? Unfortunately, yes. Sorry, what's that, Alex?
Yeah, I think maybe that's part of question is for Isabel, and we can leave this question for our panel conversation. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So do you want to wait to answer the rest of those questions?
I think we'll discuss these questions after the next speaker.
Fantastic.
And, Jason, thank you very much for
that's all right.
Nice insights. It's important, in my opinion, for all the stakeholders in the wood industry to understand how to measure the efficiency, you know, digital efficiency, what channels to use, even to reach the audience, to sell timber products, to deliver any sort of services. And that's really nice insight, you know, what you shared. In my opinion, that's pretty important even for timber companies to understand what digital channels they can use, because we live in a new digital era, and we have to use all the digital channels.